Hello and welcome to National Park Wild. I'm Eric, and after visiting all 63 US national parks, I think it is time that I narrow down which 10 are my favorites. Before we get into this ranking, subscribe to the channel so you know when new national park content comes out. I do much more than just rankings. I do individual reviews of parks, videos showcasing footage, and a whole lot more. Now for this, it is important to note that it's entirely based on my experience and preferences. To run through quickly, mountain scenery tends to be my favorite. I like desert after that. Then coastal and forest are kinda in the same area. I like wildlife more than the average person, I would say. I enjoy hiking most, but I also love snorkeling. And I think stargazing is also a pretty important factor. I like a park that has a lot to do. A park where you can see so many great things, and where there are multiple awe-inspiring sights, or even if there's just one that really stands out. And with that out of the way, let's begin the top 10 best national parks in the United States. Number 10 is the National Park of American Samoa. You may know it as American Samoa, but either way I think it is acceptable for purposes of this video. This was the last national park I went to. I was there recently, and it blew my mind. I don't tend to be taken away to island paradises. Like if I go to Key West, for example, I don't like that. That's partially because I'm in Florida though, so I guess I'm kind of already used to that sort of thing. But American Samoa, that is an island paradise. It has everything you could possibly want in that sort of experience. You have massive lush green mountains, some of the most beautiful I've ever seen. The water is possibly the most clear I've experienced, with very few exceptions. And as a result, snorkeling is top notch. Grand coral structures, abundant reef fish, possibly more species than I've seen in any other place I've ever snorkeled. Not to mention, glorious hiking, Mount Oliva being one of my favorite mountain hikes in any national park. Seeing wildlife on the land, bats flying overhead. Enjoying the unique culture of American Samoa. There is so much to do here. I had a few glorious days in this park, and it is one of the most amazing experiences I've had. It feels so different from every other national park, and honestly, I would say this was one of only 2 places I've ever traveled to where I genuinely lost track of time. It's that good. Number 9 is Grand Canyon National Park in Arizona, possibly the most well-known of any national park in the US. Many know the Grand Canyon around the world. It is a site so many try to go to, and as a result, it is one of the most popular national parks. And based on my experience, that is for good reason. The Grand Canyon, seeing from above, is impressive. Such a vast collection of rock formations, spanning beyond the horizon, the colors varying place by place, every overlook offering a different perspective. It's wonderful. However, it can be a much more marvelous experience if you hike into the canyon. I would say, without inner canyon hikes, Grand Canyon is not quite top 10. But this new gain perspective is something spectacular. As you go down along the sides of the rocks, you see more and more of them, and you look back up from where you came from. And at a certain point, you're surrounded by these enormous structures of rock, created by Mother Nature. Looking down to the Colorado River, being near it, being on it. The river is a breathtaking sight. Not to mention other great things to do here, such as look at the stars, explore the North Rim for a less busy experience, watch for wildlife such as abundant elk and mule deer, and I feel that the Grand Canyon deserves all of the praise it gets, even though there are 8 national parks I think are a bit more impressive. Number 8 is Zion National Park in Utah. Zion is absolutely unbelievable. I think the desert formations here outshine Grand Canyon. You start below them. You start in the bottom of the canyon, looking up to these magnificently sculpted rocks, some of the most impressive that nature has ever created. The way the sun hits these is in a way I don't think the Grand Canyon can even rival. Any time of day, it's incredible and it goes on forever. And when you climb to the top of something like Angel's Landing or Observation Point, you are getting the view of a lifetime. There are few parks that have a trail like Angel's Landing. You go past a chain section, look down at a green valley, but above it, rocks rising out of it, and it is a very hard view to beat. So many other great things that you do here. The Kolob Canyon area, the Narrows is one I definitely want to do one day. There is wildlife here as well, though probably to a lesser extent than the first two I mentioned. The Temple of Sinawava is a unique site, and there's so much to enjoy here. But really, it's the wow factor of those rocks that makes this one of the most awe-inspiring of all national parks. Number 7 is Big Bend National Park in Texas. The single most underrated national park in terms of both how many people seem to enjoy it and how many people go at all. This park is certainly remote, but in the same way, there are other remote parks that get more visitors, but I would say this one is very much worth traveling to. It can be difficult, but it is spectacular. This park has a few distinct regions in it, my favorite being the Chisos Mountains. These mountains have such quirky shapes. Some are incredibly sharp, some rounded, all sorts of different colors, and doing trails such as Lost Mine, early in the morning getting a sunrise view, looking out to the Rio Grande, seeing a black bear on the trail. These are some of my favorite experiences I've ever had. I adore this part of the park. And at pretty much any other national park, this could be the one area. Chisos Mountains National Park could totally be its own thing, and it would still be one of the best. However, there is more. You have 2 canyons. Boquillas Canyon, which is right along some beautiful water. And you have a bunch of unique rocks on the shore, and you can even take a small boat across the border and go to a nearby town in Mexico if you desire. Santa Elena Canyon rises above Terlingua Creek and the Rio Grande, and that is a hard view to beat. You also have a few areas with great wildlife. Here I was able to see coyotes. I saw hundreds of mule deer, which are not the most special sight for most national park viewers, obviously, but at the same time, that many is something. The bird watching is possibly the best here out of any national park. There is so much to love here. All of the hikes, all of the views, small things like Tuff Canyon, the Mule Ears, Sodal Vista. This park is the best desert national park, and I think I'm going to die on that hill. Number 6 is Yosemite National Park in California. Possibly top 3 most famous national parks. And once again, like Grand Canyon, for good reason. This one is absolutely unbeatable in terms of beauty. I don't think most of the top 5 even are more impressive than Tunnel View and the similar views in Yosemite Valley. El Capitan and Half Dome are they are something I can't believe exists. I'm at a loss for words, honestly, at Tunnel View. These granite peaks are some of the most marvelous of any view you can get in any national park. And hiking Mist Trail, and hopefully one day for me, Half Dome, it is incredible. And beyond that, you have the waterfalls, the best waterfalls in the United States. Yosemite Falls, Bridal Veil, both beautiful. And there's so much more to the park than just this Yosemite Valley area, even though that is possibly the most beautiful area in the entire United States. But you have the very pretty Hetch Hetchy area, the sequoia groves like Mariposa, possibly the best hiking of any national park overall. I think I need to go back here and really get into the backcountry someday, but for now, this is one of the quintessential US national parks, and it definitely deserves to be number 1 on your list if it is. Number 5 is Katmai National Park in Alaska. Alaska is possibly the most beautiful state, definitely in my eyes my favorite, and Katmai is among the best areas in Alaska, period. Katmai has one main sight people know: brown bears. The brown bears fish for salmon over at Brooks Camp and a few other places. It is very fun to see a mom and cub come out, get some fish, the bears walking around the path, bigger bears fighting for fish. There is so much to see here, but there is a lot more to the park than just that. The Valley of 10,000 Smokes has some of the most beautiful mountain scenery, and it is actually stunning because it is covered in volcanic ash. You do not see that every day. Rivers running through the ash, going to the top of Mount Katmai and looking inside of a volcano. I think that is definitely a top-tier experience for national parks. I adore Katmai. From the magnificent mountains, to the majestic wildlife, to the very serene feel of the park, because this is possibly the most quiet of all the parks on this list. It is definitely one of the best, and I highly recommend a visit if you can get out to Alaska. Number 4 is Lake Clark National Park. This one is right near Katmai. Sort of. Often people will lump in a trip with both, and I was very neck and neck between these two, but for now, Lake Clark National Park is better because it has even more impressive mountains and wildlife than Katmai. I was able to see brown bears here, so that is already putting it near Katmai. However, seeing wolves, Dall sheep, and moose, that was great. There was also some caribou that we saw on a flight over certain areas, and there's just a lot of wildlife to enjoy here. One thing that stands out here that you can't really enjoy as much in Katmai though, is a hike. Denali Mountain is the most dangerous, but most rewarding hike I've done ever. You have to climb up a ridge of extremely precarious and loose rock. But at the very end, you get a panoramic view of mountains and lakes of every color, looking down to Port Ellsworth where you most likely started from, and enjoying one of the most grand, spectacular views in the United States. I love this trail. I love flying over the glaciers and mountains. Right from the flight into the park, I thought, okay, this might be one of the best already. The wildlife complements this well, and it is one of the best experiences in the last frontier. Number 3 is Glacier National Park in Montana. Hiking Highline Trail and staying in Granite Park Chalet is one of my favorite experiences and best highlights of my entire travel life. It is the best trail I've ever done. It is, I don't think anything can beat it honestly, but we'll see one day. But hiking at the top of a ridge, looking down, but also looking up, seeing mountains, seeing the green valleys, it's like Angel's Landing, but the mountain scenery that appeals more to me. Wildlife along the way, you see golden eagles flying, soaring, diving, and so much more. Sunsets here are breathtaking, and going to the Grinnell Glacier overlook, me getting to see a rainbow there, that was a hard experience to compare to any other. It's one of my favorites, and there's so much more besides that at Glacier. Avalanche Lake, Hidden Lake, seeing Lake McDonald, the St. Mary region, going to the Sun Road, which I've yet to do all of because there's always been snow cover. It is such a wonderful park, and one of the most magical experiences I've ever had. There's more wildlife beyond that. I can mention the mountain goats, bears. There's so much I love here. My first moose I ever saw was in Glacier National Park. It was so close to number 2. It is definitely one of the best, and I highly, highly recommend going here as soon as you can, this summer if you can, because it definitely is worth the somewhat extensive travel time it'll take to get there. But besides that, there is nothing to dislike about this park. It beats all of the others I mentioned so far in terms of scenery, even Yosemite, and it's just that awesome. Number 2 is Denali National Park in Alaska, the final Alaska park on the list. This one is the best for one reason: the park's namesake, Denali. This mountain is the single best site in the US. There is not a single feature in nature I think can compete with this one. It is the most prominent mountain in the world. It is white nearly the whole way down, covered in snow, and then you have the dark gray rocks at the bottom. And more mountains spreading to the left of that. It is huge. And the magnificent size of this one is possibly what I like most about it. It makes for the most stellar photos I've ever taken, I think, and I honestly don't think the rest of the park even really matters when you have this mountain. But there is more to it. The big 5 wildlife is great, that being wolves, caribou, grizzly bears, moose, and Dall sheep. I have seen 4 of the 5 on both visits to the park. A clear day, Denali, is possibly the best day you'll ever have in a national park. There's hiking in the main part of the park. The bus tour, or however you get along the park road, makes for the best scenic drive I've ever done. And it is just such a great park. I love my experiences here. And while yes, it is a hard one to get to, a single glimpse of Denali could be enough to change anyone's mind on the fact that it might not be worth it to go there. This park is truly magical in a way I don't think even Glacier can compete with, and that's why it definitely had to be number 2, and it might be the most beautiful national park in America. But still, there is one park that keeps the crown after all these years. Number 1 is Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, and also Idaho and Montana. Yellowstone was a park I went to in 2015. Before then, I'd been to Grand Canyon, Everglades, and Badlands. None really seemed to do it for me. I thought, they're fine. But Yellowstone changed the way I view the world. The natural world for me has never been the same after my Yellowstone trip. Yellowstone blew me away. So many diverse features. You have the geothermal ones, the mud pots, the geysers, the Grand Prismatic Spring. The Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone is there. You have mountains, rivers, valleys teeming with wildlife. Yellowstone has everything that makes the national parks great, and as a result, I think it is the quintessential national park. And it is one of the most famous as well, for good reason. It was the first official national park, and I think it definitely deserved to be. My first visit there is the one that made me want to visit more national parks. I don't think I really had that much interest before then, and now I have been to all of them, because Yellowstone is just that good. I'm not going to go into too much more detail on what makes it great, because I've talked about this park so much before, but I highly recommend you check out other videos about Yellowstone I made, and just take away this one note. If you can only go to one national park in the United States, I think no doubt Yellowstone should be the one you go to. Yes, it can be crowded. I will say that is one knock against the park. But if you plan well, I don't think it's that big an issue. And in the same way, this park definitely earned its crowds because it is absolutely worth traveling to. And it is absolutely my favorite national park. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Comment down below your top 10 US national parks, and subscribe for more national park content. I'll see you next time.